I was going to take you through our alliance journey. So we have been setting up an alliance, and I want to start by giving you a bit of background information as to why we decided to take this alliance approach, and then talk you through the journey and the challenges and the outcomes from that. Thank you. So historically, as with a lot of local authorities, we had a lot of separate contracts. This was, and I'll talk about this a bit more later, but this was around the areas of homelessness and housing and substance misuse mainly, and mental health. And we had a lot of contracts, over 20 in these areas, held by separate commissioners with separate providers, which of course meant that we had a whole lot of separate objectives and outcomes that were all being monitored separately. So we didn't have a clear picture of the need of people who had these issues. We didn't have a clear picture of the outcomes for people either. It was all disparate. The ownership of an important point I think as well is that so where someone had presented themselves, so if someone had say a substance misuse issue and went to one of our providers with that, they would then be owned by that service. So it was kind of, you're a substance misuse person, and sort of almost forgetting that they had other issues. So there was limited join up across providers, but where clients had more than one issue, of course, there was duplication as well, because they might be going to see different providers and work was being duplicated. So all of that was just impacting really on the experience of people who were using services and impacting very much on their outcomes. So there had been an in-principle agreement from commissioners to work together to look at trying to join up services, but this really kind of started from when we did a long time ago now, and I think the date's on the next slide, but we did a Fulfilling Lives lottery application, which brought all of these providers and ourselves together, and we realised that we could actually align our contracts. Thank you. So, as I say, this was around the areas of substance misuse, mental health and homelessness, and also, yes, offending, and also we looked at domestic abuse, although later that was kind of left out of the alliance system. The process started in 2012, so it was a long process that we went through. You wouldn't necessarily need to go through this kind of length of process again, but we certainly took our time and it developed over time. So it involved, although we had over 20 contracts, it actually originally started with over 70 services, and we did a lot of work. We talked to a lot of people. This was part of the lottery bid. We talked to over 400 people using services quite in depth, and we talked to all kinds of other decision makers. We had meetings, groups, market events. We did all kinds of things, and it produced a really rounded picture of the problems and a vision of the way that we thought we would overcome them. Unfortunately, we didn't actually get the Fulfilling Lives bid, and we were sort of pipped at the post. But that really gave us a great start to this journey that we took, when we realised that we had a really good vision of the way that we could join up services. And this, again, we kind of worked together. So all these services came together, and we started with a kind of group that took this forward. And this, again, we refreshed our vision in 2015 and 2016 by talking again in depth, really, with having good conversations with services and the people who use them. And what we found was really there were quite uncomfortable truths for commissioners, because we found that people, who run services were kind of more interested in protecting their own interests and their own services probably than they were about thinking about the outcomes for service users. So people are kind of thinking about, how can they keep their service going rather than what is necessarily best for service users, but also for commissioners, because we were kind of holding ourselves up as some sorts of experts, really, and that there was a kind of master servant almost relationship with providers, where we were telling them what to do. And actually, did we really know? I mean, were we really the experts we thought we were? And actually, that the best way to go forward was to collaborate with each other and with people using services. So this kind of really came out as quite a stark picture, but it also gave us a great way forward. So so the process we went through, you can see over the time it took us, was really a very iterative process, and as I've described, kind of regularly checking back with everyone to make sure that people understood and were happy with the way that we were progressing, and it gave us a real prospect of being able to design a whole system around the needs of people, rather than having a fragmented market which was built around the needs of commissioners and services. So the kind of key messages that we came up with and we wanted to take forward were that we needed to deliver real transformational change. We couldn't stand still, and really any kind of change would be progress away from the old system, and that we needed to let go really of our old ways of working. A bit as Carolyn described, you kind of need to let go of your old processes and roles and the way that you have been working, and become different and a collective, and create a shared vision. and that we really needed to hold on to kind of what this was all about, which was about the people, and how we could create a system that people wouldn't fall out of. You know, it's no good having people who are kind of being held onto by one service when they had a whole load of other needs. But also that we needed to see this as a complex, you know, there are complex solutions. There's a complex set of problems that needs complex solutions, which can be off-putting. But I think if everybody accepts that kind of things are complex and that there are lots of grey areas and that we're not all experts, and that we need to work collectively, then you can overcome your kind of fear of the fact that you need to take this approach. And we needed a system which could respond flexibly. So it needed to be able to respond flexibly and not have kind of one set of offers that were fixed in time. And I think the really most important thing, I suppose, is about relationships of trust. So, you know, commissioners don't need to worry about being seen as experts. We're not responsible solely by ourselves, and we're working together with everyone collaboratively. And so people, you know, will make mistakes, and you know, we don't know everything, so we don't need to worry about that. And it's kind of letting go of that feeling that you need to somehow know everything about the solutions, and that we can, you know, the most important thing is to try things, but to fail fast and to learn from them. So that iterative approach, really about let's try some things out, play with possibilities, and then we just, as long as we're committed to take action, the system will develop out of that, really. So an alliance, and I have to say that we did have an expert, we employed an expert to help us with this, with the development of the alliance. An alliance, really, it's a vehicle which is about sharing risk, responsibilities and opportunities. So there are risks which providers can share, providers need to share. So for example, in our alliance to do with homelessness, one of the risks we all share is the risk of the cost of bed and breakfast and whether we can keep that under control. So there are risks, but there are also opportunities. It's a way of working based on alignment around your outcomes, so what you're agreeing as the outcomes, and a commitment to principles. So you're committing yourself to working along alliance principles and behaviours. It's not a legal entity, and the organisations retain their own identity and their own internal controls. But this is a traditional contract, so there you've got your commissioner and you've got all your providers and you have your contractual relationship separately. This is the way an alliance works. So you've got the alliance of all the providers together there, but you have got a commissioner. The commissioner is also part of the alliance. So that's a really important concept, that we are partners, we are on the alliance, and that we're all working and we're equals. So it's not about one partner making decisions, it's about all partners having to agree. So the commissioner does have, obviously, as a public sector organisation, local authority, we do have a mandate to provide certain services. We do need to provide, you know, outcomes for people. So the commissioner does have that role, but then within the alliance itself, there is that partnership approach, and we have an alliance leadership team which includes the commissioner. So we sit on the leadership team, but you have to have people on the leadership team with authority to make commitments on behalf of all the organisations. And then sitting beneath that is the management team, which is really the operational team, which is the people with the subject expertise, and they kind of get on and manage the services together jointly. And we do have an alliance manager who we appoint separately, who is the kind of go-to person who really holds the contract on behalf of the alliance and who has a relationship with the kind of local authority outside of the alliance. So the system changes that we really wanted to see were, you know, a no wrong door approach. So people can sort of present themselves at any point in the system and they'll still get the same quality and consistent offer. So that's really important across such a big system in terms of homelessness and substance misuse and mental health. A system of complex needs workers. So I think this is something that Carolyn touched on as well, that you know, we want people who have similar, so we don't want to have organisations with workers with different kind of approaches. We want to have a whole system of people who are able to deliver support wrapped around the person and accompanying them on their journey through the system. So you might be working with someone who works in one organisation, but they're supporting you through the system. We don't think that every worker can have all the skills. You know, we're not naive enough to think that someone could do everything, but we do think that we can upskill the workforce to a certain extent to be able to support someone and take them and support them through getting expertise from other workers where they might need that. But it's about reducing duplication and inefficiency and having a single assessment and a workforce that can deliver holistic support. But I think probably one of the most important things is about the collaborative decision making. You know, how do we use our resources to make for the best for people principle rather than you know, the contractual kind of relationships that we used to have. And the other thing that we've really worked hard at is about measuring what we value. So rather than having kind of key performance indicators that you would have in a traditional contract, you know, we've spent a lot of time looking at how do we measure things that are really important to us. So, for example, the individual's experience. How do they feel? Are they being listened to? Are they in control of what's happening? The things that are important for Plymouth itself, as ourselves. So things like fewer people sleeping rough, fewer people in emergency accommodation, and also happy workforce. So that's a really important measure that people are enjoying their jobs. And then sustainability of the whole system. So things like reducing the number of people who are in hospital inappropriately and people stepping down from care. So we do need to measure those things, but it has to be things that we think are important as a whole system. So the challenges. So this has been a long process, but we awarded the contract just over a year ago. So we have had experience of this now in operation, and obviously we've had things that have, you know, not gone as smoothly as we would have liked. We've learnt a lot of lessons, which we're very happy to share with people who might be wanting to go down this road. And I think, you know, a lot of it is there is willingness in principle. People are really keen on this approach, and they kind of commit themselves to it. But of course, it is really complex. Unpicking historic staffing structures, different terms and conditions. It's one thing to say, yes, we'll create a workforce that's, you know, kind of generic, but actually doing that in reality is really quite time consuming and can take time. You know, it will take time and is not simple. Things like the Alliance not being a legal entity. So when we think about, for example, if we want to recruit new posts into the system, you know, you have to think about how you're going to do that if you haven't got one overarching entity that you can recruit to. We had an issue with some of the boards that some of the charitable boards didn't appear to have been taken on the same journey during the process that we thought the staff were taking on. So we kind of came up right at the end with some boards who were saying, oh, I'm not really sure if we want to sign this alliance contract or this risk sharing agreement. And we hadn't really appreciated that we should have taken them on that journey. Ensuring the budget, so when it comes to core functions around things like the alliance manager, then there gets discussions around who's going to pay for that. So just those kind of practicalities really. And then the practicalities of reporting on system measures where there's no shared IT system, which is something that we're developing at the moment. But it, you know, it's all those things which you know, seem like pretty obvious things, but when you actually start working on them, they're quite difficult to overcome, or can be. So what we found, and certainly before COVID, and of course this has slightly changed, was we in the first year pre-COVID, there was a significant reduction in B&B spend. Sorry, that I said 1 year, didn't I? But it's actually been 2 years. Gosh, almost forgotten a whole year during COVID. So it's been a significant reduction in B&B spend, which was really fantastic in the first year, because we just, from working in that very different way and actually just thinking about how we would address people's needs as a system rather than as individual providers, and also sharing the responsibility for things like bed and breakfast spend, meant that we really managed to make fantastic inroads into getting people out of bed and breakfast. Of course, now since COVID, it has started to increase, but as it has everywhere, but starting from a sort of lower base than it would have done. There's been an increase in independent accommodation units, so we've managed to secure more accommodation, better outcomes for people, we think, with more creative solutions. Everything has now become a shared problem rather than having those contracts individually. And also, you know, the autonomy to remodel services quickly, so that kind of permission to just try things, as Carolyn described, certainly during COVID as well, but even before that, we were, you know, felt that there was more permission to just kind of get on with remodeling, because that's what we'd said we would do. We would transform services. Have been successful in funding to support rough sleeping, and I know other local authorities were, certainly during COVID as well. And the reduction was in numbers of rough sleepers was definitely happening pre-COVID. The shared database is being implemented. That's taken longer than we thought, but it is happening. And then co-locating staff. So that's been really great because we've had some co-location of staff working, for example, for our health service, NHS staff, being co-located with people in hostels and all kinds of other support to rough sleepers. It's much more joined up now than it would have been. So so there has been some real progress, and obviously COVID kind of put a bit of a spanner in the works, but we hopefully will pick up and move forward from there. I think that's it. Thank you.